welcome to this talk about a different topic. And you might be wondering, why did I choose to speak about students being too shy to speak, and therefore we should coach them? Well, the inspiration for this talk came from a class I taught at a business English group and a company where the students were required to develop their presentation skills further and become more effective when talking to foreign clients, the business shareholders, or even the other colleagues in meetings. And so it started that initially I thought of just using the usual techniques. However, I decided to try something different. And in case you're wondering why I decided to choose coaching, I'm now going to pass it on to you and ask you, why do you think I chose coaching rather than something else? Right. So, the reason I opted for coaching is that it is student-oriented or individual-oriented. The individual in a coaching session is involved in the decision-making, and that's exactly what I wanted the students to do. I wanted them to decide what it was that they were going to take with them on this training session, from this training session. And so it started that they were encouraged to define their goals. In this particular case, they all wanted to improve their communication skills and their presentation techniques. Then they were encouraged to find out how they were going to do it, which of the skills they would have to develop further and thus become more adept at, and finally also try to define which of their skills would enhance their progress and which of them would limit their path towards success. And it was this involvement and this participation on part of the students that made the course so successful and enabled them to actually meet the required goals and become more effective in their presentation skills. However, without this awareness of how they can develop and how they can become more valuable to the different companies, or how they can recognize their true potential, many of us are simply what I like to call rough diamonds. Now, diamonds, of course, whether they're rough or not, have their value. However, we all know that a girl's best friend is the sparkly, shiny ones that we find on the windows of the jewelers. Likewise with people. They too tend to shine brighter when they are prepared and they've planned and they have developed their skills further. And so it was that this particular group, and my slide has just moved a bit faster than I intended, and so it was that with this group we decided to move from mind to market. We decided to develop their skills in the classroom in such a way that they could get to the boardroom and present more competently and with greater impact. And even though the items that are on the slides might seem very simple to us as teachers, in some cases they were actually quite surprising to the students. They thought that having a mountain of data, having loads of information, was enough to ensure that they had a good presentation. And that wasn't quite the idea. They had to learn that they had to pace their tone, they had to pace their speaking, they had to think of what they were going to do next, they had to think of their audience, they had to consider the importance of the introduction and how impactful those first 5 seconds are in catching the attention of their audience, that they only have one chance at making that first impression. Secondly, they had to also think of their audience. What was their audience's objectives? Did they just want to hear all that data, or did they actually know all that data and wanted something new? What was it that the audience and themselves, the presenters, wanted to get across? The next step was, of course, the preparation. And this was a bit confusing at first, because they thought that the information they had to go straight onto the PowerPoint, and that also had to be filtered. Do you want to put your audience to sleep in the first 5 minutes? Then do that. Start reading what you have on your slides. Otherwise, keep it short and simple, and you will probably retain the attention of your audience for longer. One of the toughest tasks for them, however, was adjusting to meet expectations. They didn't really know what was expected. And I'm repeating myself here. What was expected of them? What was the audience's expectations? And they had to reflect on what was it that the audience could know, or what was it that the clients or their business partners or the shareholders could know, and that they were simply repeating to them and being redundant. So they had to go further and do some extra research so as to give them something new that would arouse their interest. The part about engaging the audience was also relatively novel to them. They expected to deliver their presentation in a very straight-faced manner. And I had to highlight the importance of using jokes or humor, a witty remark, of storytelling, and something that I wouldn't advise anyone to do at a conference like this one where the clock is ticking, but the importance of pauses, the importance of having the silences. It's quite effective, to actually engage and retain, once again, the audience's attention, especially if you start your presentation with a question and you pause. Eventually somebody from the audience will feel obliged to reply to you. Now, finally, they were quite interested in the part about practice, making it perfect. And this part of the preparation varied. There were some students who went to the trouble of video recording themselves and then requesting a one-to-one session with me where for different feedback and to notice what was positive and what would need to be improved. There were others that simply prepared their talk, prepared their slides, and went through it while they were flying out to the different destinations where they were meeting the clients or other colleagues. And once this homework or the groundwork has been done, then it's quite easy for the 5 C's of diamonds to show up. And then you do find that, in this case, the students were more comfortable when they were making their talks. They were at ease because they knew the information, they had focused on what was important, what was crucial, and therefore they were able to think of other ways to provide the information. In some cases, they started using handouts with all the complementary information which they gave to the audience before the conference or before the presentation so that they did not have to bore them with all the extra info. They were also able to engage and to connect and to establish rapport with their audience much more naturally. Because now, of course, the anxiety levels were slightly more in control and they were able to produce their speech much more naturally and sometimes effectively and correctly. Then, of course, the element of curiosity. If they added something new to their talk, this would show that they were interested in what they were doing. And not only that, but also that they were curious and interested in what the audience knew. So they would, of course, as I mentioned earlier, arouse the curiosity and the interest of their target audience. Naturally, they would also be much more energetic and passionate about what they were doing. They would deliver the much desired, memorable presentation. And having done all the homework and having prepared the presentations at home or in the classroom, then their speech was much clearer, their ideas had a sequence, and therefore they were able to present something that came across as being specific and much more interesting to the audience. And what I often would share with them is that it did not matter how they came across, it mattered how they saw themselves. Now, if they saw themselves as these meek little kittens that everybody likes to pet, that was fine. But when they were trying to persuade a client to buy the product, or if they were trying to share the information with the shareholder in such a way that he would continue investing in the company, they maybe needed to be more like the jungle, the king of the jungle, and roar rather than meow. And my last slide is, as I call it, a nugget of wisdom. The slide that's up, the image that's up, actually it became the mantra of this particular group. They would often mention that it was when they were under pressure, when they were talking to these foreign clients, when they were making that impactful presentation that would have consequences for the company, that they had to be brilliant, that they had to sparkle, and that there were no cookies that crumbled under pressure. So, I hope that this has helped you to see how we can present and in different ways, and how we can use different techniques to get students, especially adult students, who sometimes shy away from talking because they're so self-conscious about what they are saying, to encourage them to start speaking and to learn that preparation is often the key to a better speech or to a better presentation. And should anyone have any questions about how coaching can be used in other areas of our teaching, then please go ahead and email me on the address that's on your slides. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy your weekend. That is all.